official agenda. And we have one deletion on this, and that's item F. And I believe we have Alderman Cox would like to add something this time as well.
We could add a discussion of the management of the current rubbish contract to the board business agenda.
We'll make that the last item, like item J, if it's all right. With that change, any other changes? With that change, do I have an approval of the official agenda?
Second.
We have a motion, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, passes. The first thing I have is to do an official proclamation for the Junior Auxiliary of Starkville, Mississippi. Whereas the Junior Auxiliary of Starkville, Mississippi, a chapter of the 64-year-old National Association of Junior Auxiliaries, Incorporated, represents a serious endeavor on the part of women to be active, constructive participants in the community and to assume responsible leadership in meeting community needs. And whereas the mission of the National Association of Junior Auxiliaries Incorporated is to encourage member chapters to render charitable services which are beneficial to the general public, particular emphasis on children, and to cooperate with other organizations performing similar services. And whereas the Junior Auxiliary of Starkville, Mississippi works actively to perform the mission of the National Association of Junior Auxiliaries Incorporated in this community, and we appreciate their efforts. Now, therefore, be it claimed that I, Dan Camp, Mayor of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, do hereby designate the week of April the 2nd through the 8th, 2006 as Junior Auxiliary Week in Starkville, Mississippi, sponsored by the National Association of Junior Auxiliaries Incorporated, and urge all citizens, all civic and fraternal groups, all news media, and other community organizations to join in the salute to the Junior Auxiliary volunteers who have been an important presence in this community since 1958. Thank you. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge Deborah Wood of the Municipal Court Clerks completing her seminar in accordance with Code 21-23-12. Congratulations. Do we have an approval of the minutes? Have all of you had the opportunity to read the minutes of the special call meeting of February 22nd, 2006, and the regular recess meeting of August the 16th, 2005?
Mayor,
Yes.
I wanted to make a comment first under Mayor Board comments.
Yes.
I just wanted to make two announcements. First one is that we're going to have a meeting of the Technology Committee a week from this Thursday, April 13th at 3 o'clock in the conference room, and I'll go ahead and have an agenda a day or two before with Vicki in the front lobby if anyone's interested. And the second announcement was that at the next Board of Aldermen meeting, I plan to present before the board a resolution and an ordinance that, if passed, would allow for the sale of alcoholic beverages on Sunday. And I wanted to announce that so that if people had a strong opinion for or against, and wanted to talk about it, would know and would be able to be here and or email me, excuse me, and other board members in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you so very much, Richard. I talked briefly before the meeting to Alderman Roy Perkins. He is strong of voice. His selection of words, his turn of phrase has not changed at all. And he has given me specific instructions at various points in the meeting to comment on his behalf. You can imagine Roy doing this. My first instruction was to thank everyone that expressed concern and best wishes to him during his recent health flare-up. I still have no information about the particular health problem. He thought he was going to be here tonight and indeed wanted to be here. His wife, the RN, told him that you will not be at the meeting tonight, so just get over it. And so he eagerly awaits reading the news media tomorrow, and I suspect I'll get a phone call at some point tonight wanting to know what happened at the meeting. But he expresses his thanks for your expressions of concern.
Thank you, Alderman.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
in light of Alderman Corey's announcement or preview, if it were, of the next board meeting, I'm going to be out of town for our next board meeting in Hattiesburg on business schedule, so I don't know if you want to take it up without me here, or if you would like to delay until I am here to weigh in on the issue as well. But I just would like to go ahead and announce that I will not be at our next meeting, so.
Thank you, sir. Do we have the approval of the special call meetings of February the 22nd, 06, and the regular recess meeting of August 16th, 05?
Mr. Mayor, on the call meeting August 16th, 05, I have highlighted some errors and some things that need to be corrected. And I was thinking that I had submitted these at one time. It's not major changes, it's merely this misspelling of names and or a few words.
Well, can we get them approved with those changes made?
Well, we voted not to do that, but I don't have any problem. And one I just point out is like the misspelling of Mrs. MacArthur's name is Edith MacArthur. And her name is misspelled numerous times here. And the misspelling of it's John Moore, not Johnny Moore, Planning and Zoning Commission. And I can recall having submitted these, I guess they were overlooked. Oh, and one other is where it says that we voted unanimously as a board to approve. It had something to do with the cemetery, and I know I never voted to approve anything but Oddfellow Cemetery on University Drive.
Ms. Self, what motion do you refer to on this?
Number 4.
Under public appearances, item 4, on page 3. That was for the expansion of the property.
So that should reflect a nay vote from you.
Nick, yes, it was, and they
Apparently, there was a motion made to expand the cemetery area.
It's on page 6, order number 4 in the minutes.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Page 6. You
Uh,
can see how this thing follows.
I recall the content of the motion that it was made myself, whether or not it was a unanimous vote, I do not recall it.
I do recall because I know how I voted.
All right, so you're saying it was not unanimous then?
She's
No, it
saying
was
she
not.
voted nay.
I voted nay.
Okay,
I believe that was during our time frame in which we were showing hands.
I don't know. Well, if it was show of hand, then my hand was nay.
Okay. Did you note those corrections? So do we have any problem with the minutes of February 22nd?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the acceptance of the minutes of February 22nd, 2006.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of February 22nd, 2006. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Those minutes are passed. I guess we'll just have to bring these other minutes back,
Which one?
the 16th.
Can we not approve the 16th with Ms. Self's corrections?
I don't
Does
see any
anyone
reason why
object
we
to that?
can't, but we
Since she-
decided last time we wouldn't be making any of these approvals with
Since
these.
she verbalized.
But she
them,
verbalized it in the
Okay,
meeting.
all right, well, let's,
that's-
go
and
ahead.
everybody
PC,
understands
got
what
five
the
other people
correction,
here. Do what?
since everybody understands what the correction is, and it's not just a nebulous necessary correction.
Okay, that's fine. Do we have approval for August 16th, 2005?
Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of August 16th, 2005 pending Alderman Self's corrections.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to approve August 16th, please say aye. Okay, that passes. We have a fast forward that's been suggested by Mr. Cox here, and that if you look at the item under the board business, we have a Mr. Rumble, we're going to bring forward on a provision here for a hardship. Help me out here, Matt, where is it? Yes, number H, isn't it?
It's under, first A, 9A.
9A. Mr. Rommel? Do you mind coming up where we'd go ahead and take this kind of out of order? Consideration of the amendment to the zoning ordinance to include a hardship exception and to amend the definitions section.
All right, we'll take this in two parts. This was done at the request of two of the aldermen, based on a recent hearing by the Board of Adjustments. We have given you should have it, a guidelines to define a hardship, which would be inserted in the definition of the Starkville zoning ordinance. And for the record, the premise cannot be used in a manner permitted by the ordinance unless the variance is granted. Number two, strict application of the terms of the ordinance will preclude its use for any purpose to which the land is reasonably adopted. Number three, inability to put the property to its most profitable use does not constitute unnecessary hardship. Number four, the hardship must be a compelling force. Number five, mere inconvenience to the applicant is not sufficient grounds for unnecessary hardship. The hardship must be a compelling force. Number six, value alone is not a proper criterion in determining unnecessary hardship. Number seven, the burden of proof of unnecessary hardship rests upon the applicant, and without such proof, such variance must be denied. And number eight, the hardship must be peculiar to the property in question and not be common to other properties in the district. Now, this is the guidelines for any sort of evaluation by a board, whether it be the Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission, or this body. The amendment, and this is an proposed amendment to the Starkville zoning ordinance to be inserted as Article 5, Section 1, conditional uses. And it is listed as number 7, site standards for mobile homes, RVs, and travel trailers used as hardship secondary dwellings on single-family residential lots outside of mobile home parks. These are the criteria. A mobile home may be utilized as a hardship secondary dwelling on a single-family residential lot outside of mobile home parks, provided that the following conditions are met. A, the Board of Appeals must find that a hardship situation exists because of a medical disability, and that the hardship mobile home, and remember mobile home also includes travel trailers and RVs, mobile home unit will not adversely affect the adjoining and surrounding properties. The disability shall be established by certification of a licensed physician. The definition of medical disability for the purpose of this article is a medically demonstrable disability which is permanent and which renders the disabled individual incapable of performing for himself or herself everyday essential activities such as dressing, preparing meals, bathing, and taking medications. B, a permit for the hardship secondary mobile home RV travel trailer dwelling shall be issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals and shall be valid for only 6 months. Said permit may be reviewed by request of the holder in the form of a petition requesting a 6-month extension by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Such request shall include a statement by the licensed physician that such medical disability continues to exist. In no case shall the permit be extended beyond 1 year. Number C, the hardship mobile home dwelling must be placed on a tract of land in compliance with the district zoning regulations upon which it is located. D, the hardship mobile home RV travel trailer dwelling must be in the rear yard behind the primary single-family detached dwelling unit on the lot, and the house shall be the residence of either the disabled individual, a member of the disabled person's immediate family, or a legally appointed guardian for the disabled individual. The hardship mobile home shall not be rented or used for any other income-producing purpose. E, no addition shall be made to any hardship mobile home dwelling. And F, a hardship use mobile home shall be located on a tract of land consistent with the location of buildings on adjoining lots. This refers to the setback, side clearances, and lot dimensions. That is basically the two areas that we addressed on this.
Mr. Holman, can you talk a little bit about how other communities deal with this? Are these hardship guidelines relatively
These were
common?
hardship guidelines. I couldn't find any other communities in Mississippi, but these came from Alabama and Texas, the definitions that I got off Google, off the internet. And specifically, these fitted best within the framework of our zoning ordinance. And since this is primarily a land use issue, that's the reason why I felt that was where they needed to go.
It would seem to me that it would make sense to have our advisory bodies, the planning and zoning commissions, and potentially even the Board of Adjustments to review these and provide a recommendation back to this board. And if that would be the pleasure of the board to submit these to them and to be provided additional perhaps recommendations or their approval of this, is that the direction that we want to head in? It seems to make the most sense to have them review this document.
So you're putting that in the form of a motion that you have the other boards to review this and to see that it meets all their criteria, and then come back before us with their recommendation. Is that what you're recommending?
Yes, sir, and do so in the form of a motion.
We have a second to that motion. We have a motion with a second. Any further discussion?
I personally would rather go ahead and take this item under consideration and vote on it tonight. I have put a lot of weight into what the Planning and Zoning Board says, but they are still serve as an advisory panel to us. And our city planner has made his own recommendation, and I think that we should listen to what he has to say and take it under consideration now.
Unfortunately, Richard, these are proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance that are not in proper form for amendment consideration, and certainly need, in my opinion, to be reviewed, particularly by the Planning and Zoning Commission. You have such things, for example, and this is what just popped out to me immediately. The disability shall be established by a certification of a licensed physician. Licensed by whom?
Assume the state medical board.
Well, see, we can't
Or the-
assume the state medical board
Well,
or assume
whatever
anything.
licensing agency needs to do it.
Needs to be much more
What other
specific.
licensed board would it be other than the medical board?
There are all sorts of physicians across
Well,
the
name some
country
of 'em.
licensed by all sorts of different groups.
I do not understand that.
Well,
The medical profession is licensed by the American Medical Association.
Could be used.
think and maybe and perhaps and I assume and so forth doesn't really get it in definitions.
Can we say,
That's
Right.
why these other, I don't want to deal with
Right.
language tonight, that's why these other agencies ought to take a look at this.
well,
And
I'm
I
glad
agree
you-
with the motion that it be referred to
So
planning
is
and
that
zoning.
suggesting that he know more than we do?
in support of Alderman Corey, it is timely and propitious since I just got through putting together the planning commission agenda, but it hasn't gone out until tomorrow. I can attach this for their review and consideration to be considered as a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. When we adjust the language.
Okay, we have a motion, and we have a second to the motion, that this go back to the, go to the planning and zoning for review. Mr. Corey has, expressed his, concern. We will now vote on this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. Thank you, Mr. Rowland.
Mr. Mayor, one comment I would like to make before I go away. In front of each of you, you have a rather large book. Do not be frightened by it or anything like that. This is what is the proposed by resolution Starkville Development Code. It contains approximately 17 or 18 different ordinances related to land development in the city, which are on the internet now. But a lot of you do not have the time or necessarily the ease to go to the computer and read it. So this is the reason I provided you a hard copy. The items that you see in italics are proposed amendments or changes. There are certain proposed items that are not adopted yet, but there is a disclaimer page on this. All these have your names on them. These are the result of a lot of hard work with some good interns coming in. So look at them. If you have any questions or anything, get in touch with me, because I'll be bringing back to you that we adopt this by resolution, because you've already adopted most of the ordinances, but you have them all in one place. When a developer comes to town, this is it. So anyway, this is for your information, so hang on to the books and read them carefully.
Mr. Rommel, in connection with the zoning ordinance changes, the reason why we had requested us to put forward these hardship guidelines and potentially make an amendment to the zoning ordinance was because of an issue that was brought to the board at the last board meeting concerning a recommendation from the Board of Appeals. And I've been thinking about that over the past 2 weeks and would like for the board to reconsider that decision. In essence, we made a decision based on a concern for precedent. And of course, we've established, it certainly wasn't the first time that would have ever set precedent. And I think we have to have a greater good consideration here. There's overwhelming extenuating circumstances with respect to the request that was made and approval and the recommendation that the Board of Adjustments presented to us. And I would like to put forth a motion this evening that we accept that Board of Adjustment recommendation for a temporary exception with the conditions that the Board of Adjustments placed on that recommendation, and do so in the form of a motion.
Do we have a second to that motion? Did you understand? Basically, he's revisiting the recommendation of the Board of Adjustment and Appeals to issue a hardship case here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And he's
Specific to Mr. Fitzgerald's request.
That's right. And that he's revisiting that, and he has put forth a form of a motion for us to revisit that.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Do we have any other discussion in regard to that motion?
While I understand the good intentions that Alderman Cox's motion with which it is made, nothing has changed since last time. We are without legal authority to grant an exception according to the ordinances of the city of Starkville. To do so would be contrary to law. Mr. Favor, do you have an opinion on that?
I think we've already settled, that was settled last time. That's the reason why this is being brought forward tonight, to go out and get it changed to fit within the exceptions. But it's not been approved tonight, so it's not part of our ordinance. So
Right, so to
opinion
do
hasn't
so would be,
changed.
please restate your
My
opinion,
opinion hadn't changed from last time,
which was?
that it would be contrary to law based on our ordinance, the way it exists at this time.
All right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of Mr. Cox's motion, please show by raising your hand. All those opposed? I will vote that we give this exception. I believe that's a 4-3.
Mayor, I sit in amazement at a tie-breaking vote that is, comes right after the city attorney has expressed that this is contrary to law. And of course, I would remind the board again, based on the fact that Alderman Perkins is not here, that the matter will perhaps again be up for reconsideration at the next meeting.
Understand that, but we also have a legal body which gave this recommendation, and we have totally ignored that legal body's recommendation.
That is incorrect. It is no legal body. It is an appointed commission of the city, and it made a recommendation based on something that's contrary to the city ordinances. You know, this, to do so is amazing.
We will move on. Well, it brings us down to public appearances. Presentation of the 2004-2005 audit report.
Mayor, board, it's nice to come visit with y'all on a night when the agenda is not quite as crowded as it has been since we completed the audit. All of you should have received in your package probably 2 meetings ago a copy of the city audit. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You're correct, Keith. I'm just still overwhelmed at the last action. Please go ahead. I'll pay attention.
The reason we're here this evening is because the state auditor says it is a requirement that the auditor appear before the city board and present to you the results of the audit, and that this appearing before you needs to be acknowledged in the board minutes. Just since I realize that most of you don't have the report with you, I'll give you some page numbers and some references of the things that I think you need to be aware of. On page 2 of the report is the independent auditor's report. The important things in this report are 2 things. One, the 3rd paragraph says, in connection with our audit, nothing came to our attention that caused us to believe that the municipality is not in compliance with the requirements of the State Department of Audit as set forth in the Municipal Compliance Questionnaire. That's a good paragraph. It's followed by the next paragraph, which says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities of the city. Basically, it's what's in layman's terms known as a clean opinion. There is, I'm sure as you have looked through this, quite a number of pages. I will call to your attention on page 11 the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, governmental funds for the year ended September 30th, 2005. The concern to me here as your auditor is that in the year that ended September the 30th, 2005, the general fund had a net change in fund balance of a negative $1,434,000, lowering our fund balance from $3,000,008 to $2,000,004. So when you started your current fiscal year on October the 1st, you only had $2.4 million available to you as a beginning fund balance. On a budget of about $13 million, $2 million is getting what I would say that's getting a rather tight point, and I don't think I have to tell the board that. I think the budget committee is well aware of the fact that it's a pretty tight budget that we now face as we come through the year 2006. The other parts of the report that I would call to your attention is that on page 50 there are a series of reports with regards to the studies that we had to do with regards to the internal control structure, and also compliance with federal laws with regards to federal grants. You will find when you look through those reports that all of those reports reflected no findings. The last page that I would call to your attention is page 59, and this is a schedule of findings and questioned cost. There are no questioned costs. There are, in fact, only one finding, and that finding has to do with our accounting for our payroll withholdings. We've been working with the city clerk's office to more accurately get those payroll tax withholding liability accounts reconciled on a monthly basis. And we are moving forward with that, and I think that's getting done. In section 1 on page 59, it actually details out for you the broad scope of the things that we did in looking at the city. And I think you'll find that all of those statements there are positive. The auditor's report expressed an unqualified opinion. The audit of the financial statement did not disclose any material weaknesses in internal control. No instances of non-compliance material to the financial statements were disclosed. The audit did not disclose any material weaknesses in internal control over major programs. So I think you'll find that it was a very good year. The people within the city clerk's office continue to do what we think is a good job. We appreciate their cooperation. We appreciate our relationship with the board. If any of you as board members have specific questions about the audit report this evening, I'll be happy to attempt to address them. If you would rather email me, or if you'd rather give me a call, we're open to discuss with you as a group, or we're open to discuss with you individually any issues with regards to the audit of the city that you would like to have discussed.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Winfield, I noticed Mr. Jim Henry sitting in the third row back, and I was just curious as to, number one, why he wasn't up front with you, and number two, if he had any comments about our audit.
Sumner?
I understand the answer to both those questions, so,
First off, let me acknowledge Jim. Jim is one of our young CPAs who was one of the real trench diggers on the audit. He was the one that got down in the trenches and dug a lot of this out. It's the middle of tax season. Mr. Henry didn't really realize that I was going to make him come up here with me, and he had left his tie at home.
Well, all right.
But I apologize for being remiss in not recognizing Jim, because Jim is one of our young CPAs that we're quite proud of, and he's getting to know an awful lot about governmental accounting. In fact, some days he says he knows more than he wants to.
I just know how he loves public speaking, so I can't believe he missed the opportunity.
Next year, I will make sure that he gets to wear a tie and sit up front.
That'll be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. Very good.
You need a motion from the mayor to accept this.
Do we have a motion to accept the audit report?
so moved.
Second.
Motion with a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're ready for our first public hearing on the TIF bonding district. Go ahead.
As we talked about back in February, tax increment financing is a tool that a city can use to promote development, economic development, by having the increases in ad valorem and sales tax that result from development pay for infrastructure, that sort of thing comes from that. The first step to do that is required by the statute is to have a general tax increment financing redevelopment plan for the municipality. In February, you adopted your resolution indicating your intent to have a hearing on that plan, and then that hearing was noticed for tonight. The publication has been met. You've gotten the input from the planning commission as required by the statute. So now you're ready to take any comments that the public would have on that plan, and then to take action on approving the plan, and that'll be the first step that will allow you to come back later and create a tax increment financing district and do a specific project, or more than one district for that matter. first step to get there.
Do we have any members of the public here tonight that would like to have a comment on the planned, TIF bonding district? Well, let me make this clear that the specific district area has not really been planned. That will be coming through the planning department and will come out at a later date of the specific areas that will be the TIF bonding districts.
And to add on to what the mayor said, to reemphasize, this redevelopment plan is the entire corporate limits of the city, and you can have multiple TIF districts within a redevelopment district. So, and as was mentioned earlier, this is the first step in the process legally to get to TIF districts.
And Keith, why don't you, in 25 words or fewer, which are a considerable number less than Randy used with the Planning and Zoning Commission at the last meeting, summarize for the board and the audience exactly what the TIF district and TIF financing is.
Okay, TIF financing is when you would go out and borrow money, issue bonds to finance improvements. It could be streets, it could be sewer improvements within a district. Streets, in fact, could be leading up to the district. They wouldn't have to be within it. The way it normally works is you have land that's vacant or that's underutilized, and you have some major business that's going to come in, a Lowe's, a Walmart, a Home Depot, and something like that, so that when the new business comes in, there's going to be a lot more sales tax generated, and a lot more the value of the property will go up. And instead of the city having to put its credit on the line and be responsible just out of general tax revenues to pay for these expenditures, you in essence make the taxes from the increased development pay for that so that it really pays for itself. And so that you're promoting development at the same time, it's not putting the city's credit at risk. You're letting the taxes that wouldn't have been there without the development then pay for the development. So that's basically the whole concept.
There's no additional burden on the existing taxpayers, basically.
That's correct. No additional burden on existing taxpayers. And the ad valorem or sales taxes you're talking about are the ones that would come out of the district that's created. So you define a specific area of town, and you say the area around, this acreage right here is going to be our TIF district. And then when that ad valorem tax goes up, or when sales taxes start being produced in that area, those are the taxes that can go pay for the bond. So it's kind of a win-win situation, basically. That's why it's being so widely used across the country as well as across Mississippi right now.
Again, do we have any public that is present tonight that would like to address any questions? Thank you, sir.
And you have a resolution approving in your packet.
And do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Mr. Mayor and Board, I would offer for adoption the resolution entitled Resolution of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, finding that notice of the public hearing on the adoption of the tax increment financing redevelopment plan, City of Starkville, Mississippi, February 2006, was duly published as required by law, that the public hearing was held as required by law, and approving and adopting the tax increment finance redevelopment plan, City of Starkville, Mississippi, February 2006.
Second.
We got a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it passes. Thank you. This brings us, thanks for coming up tonight. This brings us down to citizens' comments. We have 3 minutes allotted to each citizen that would like to say something.
Good evening to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. The citizens, we would like to know where are the stages of the just complex and all that's involved in that, where it's staged now, and we very, very concerned. Then we're getting warm weather, and we would like to see something taking place. The citizens, Starkville Housing Authority, we have a through street from Wood Street to 12, and it's very highly trafficked, and we have children that play, and we would like to, if we could, get a slow children that play sign placed there, because a lot of time the children would not look out for themselves, and we want them to run in front of a bus, police car, drug car, that they will not see the children before the children see them. And we would like to know, also, we really need jobs in Starkville, and hopefully that probably will deter crime and make things much better.
Anyone else that would like to have 3 minutes? We'll move on. The mayor has no business tonight to discuss that brings us down to board business. The first item on board business is consideration. I think this is you, isn't it, Matt?
Yes, sir. Tonight, just a brief discussion about an integrated pest management program. Of course, we all know mosquito season is fast approaching, and we'll need a strong coordinated effort to manage these pests. To that end, we've invited Dr. Blake Layton, who's an entomologist at Mississippi State, to present to us some of his thoughts for an effective mosquito abatement program. Dr. Layton, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Board. I have perused y'all's agenda and know that it's crowded, so I will try to be brief. And I'm just going to stick to mosquito control because I know that's the issue. We have about 50 species of mosquitoes in Mississippi. There are some of those that cause more problems than others. And the point I want you to realize with this is that those mosquitoes are different in how they live, how they breed. Some will fly 40 miles to get a bite on us. Some will only fly as far as our own backyard. Some we grow in our own backyard. Some we grow in temporary pools of water. Some we grow in other places. So somebody that's managing mosquitoes in Starkville needs to be aware of this mosquito biology to some degree. A real brief history of mosquito biology is that they start out as eggs. Sometimes the eggs are laid individually. They hatch into things called wigglers in the water. And these don't feed on us. They feed on organic matter in the water. They pupate, and then eventually in about 10 to 14 days they emerge as adult mosquitoes. And that's where the problem begins. The males don't bite, but the females do. And they're a nuisance in that way. And then of course they have the potential to transmit disease. And we've had some real important mosquito-transmitted diseases in the past few years. We've had some fatalities in Mississippi from West Nile virus and some other things. And that increases concern about mosquitoes anytime we have a mosquito-borne disease underway. Now, unfortunately, those little mosquitoes that we breed in our own backyard are also the ones that are most likely to transmit human diseases. They grow in association with humans, so it stands to reason that they would transmit human diseases. Now, my point about mosquito control is I want to show you what I call the mosquito control pyramid. And just like any pyramid, it's important to build a strong foundation. And there we say eliminate breeding sites, then control the larvae, then control the adults. That's the fogging truck, so it's up there in the third tier. It's third in importance, and then as a last ditch effort, if we still haven't succeeded, then we have to wear a mosquito repellent in our long pants when we go outside. Now, when you think about mosquito breeding sites, don't think of a pond like that. A nice big body of water like that, permanent body of water, is not going to be a source of mosquitoes because there are other things that live in it that eat mosquitoes, and they usually do a good job of controlling mosquitoes for us. That little fish on your lower left-hand corner is called the mosquito fish, and it can breed even in little ditches like the one you see there on your right-hand side. So those on your left-hand side are potential mosquito breeding sites. Permanent water that may only be there for 2 or 3 weeks or less, because it's not there long enough for fish to become established. Mosquitoes can fly to it, lay their eggs, and they can complete a life cycle in that amount of time. Also containers, Coke cans, tires, things of that nature. That's where mosquito breeding sites are. So we need to think about that as part of our mosquito management program. If it can hold water for even 3 or 4 days, it can breed mosquitoes. And you might say, hey, wait, you just said it took 10 to 14 days for them to complete a life cycle. But sometimes in Mississippi it rains every 3 or 4 days, and if we get a 2-week period of that, then we can have mosquitoes successfully breed. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, mosquito control begins, I said some of our most important species are backyard breeders, so it begins around the home. So public education is a really important part of any municipal mosquito control program. And the better we can get that message across, the better we'll do. And those are just some examples, you're familiar with those, of areas that mosquitoes can breed in. And then we get to this issue of municipal mosquito control, the Starkville mosquito control program, which, by the way, I have examined y'all's current mosquito control policy, and it looks to me like it's already a good mosquito IPM program. It really covers a lot of these different areas that I'm going to mention here. Of course, municipal mosquito control, that means tax dollars at work. I heard some discussion of the budget, and I know there's different areas that need to be covered, and mosquito control is not the only one. Some of the main components of a big mosquito control program, let's say like Dade County, Florida, the city of New Orleans, or Cleveland, Mississippi, they actually have a fairly big mosquito control program. Or surveillance, they have a biologist on staff, a trained entomologist that runs that program, and he has a staff that helps implement that program. And surveillance, looking to see what species of mosquitoes are there, when they're there, how abundant they are, that type of thing. That's kind of the foundation. Source reduction that we've talked about, and then larvicide, doing something to kill those immature mosquitoes. And then finally, if that doesn't work, that's when we have to get the fogging truck out and try to kill the adults. So some of these surveillance techniques on your left, this guy's using a dipper to dip in these stagnant bodies of water, shallow bodies of water, to see if there are actually mosquito larvae there. In that lower left-hand corner, you can see there are some. On your right-hand corner, that's a trap for adult mosquitoes that some of these municipalities will use to determine, do we have adult mosquitoes in the area, what species are they, when do we need to be spraying, if we need to be spraying at all. As far as source reduction, of course, the thing that a city or a municipality or county can do is drainage projects. If it's an area that needs to be drained, making sure storm drains are open. I show a road grader there to open ditches, but also to smooth out low areas around maybe a soccer field or some sort of new establishment like that in a park. And vegetation maintenance, because these adult mosquitoes will rest and hide in vegetation. Now, this source reduction could even get a regulatory component to it, because stacks of used tires or other types of debris. This is going to be a big problem in the coastal areas this year. Big stacks of debris, rain falls in there, accumulates, good source for mosquitoes to breed. So sometimes just cleanup drives can have a big impact. Citywide cleanup drives, that, especially if they include an educational component to the public, that can have a big place. It's larviciding, and I know that that's already a part of y'all's plan, and this can be really important, but you've got to take the time. You've got to have somebody on staff that will identify and map out those breeding sites, potential breeding sites. And remember, they're temporary in a lot of cases. They're there 1 to 2 weeks after rainfall. During dry weather, they don't exist. And what they do then is put some of these larvicides, which are very safe products, biological products in some cases, in this standing water to control these mosquito larvae. There's some examples there, and I brought 2 documents with me that I will leave with y'all to copy if that's desired by the board. One is a document on how to set up a mosquito control program, and another is a document on the different pesticides that are recommended for commercial outdoor mosquito control in Mississippi. So that might be useful to whoever's managing y'all's mosquito control program at this time. They may already be aware of that. But finally, we get to the fogging truck. Now, some of the questions we get about this is, well, does it really work? And the answer to that is yes. One example of that, following Hurricane Katrina, the Board of Health in Mississippi was down there working in that area, and they decided that they needed an area-wide spray. So they sprayed all 3 coastal counties aerially in about a 4-night period, and they were trapping these mosquito populations. They got about a 90% reduction, 95 I think it was, in mosquito populations from that one spray. Now, one spray alone wasn't enough to keep them from rebounding back, but it did have efficacy. But very high efficacy. Some of the insecticides that are available for use there, I list. I'm not going to go into those because they're fairly technical terms, but whoever's managing your program would be interested in those. And another question is, well, do these insecticides impact us? And we do have at least one study from Mississippi done in 2002 where they compared levels of this particular pesticide, permethrin, in people that were inside the management program, the fogging route, versus outside. And in this case, they found no difference in the levels of permethrin in those people. What they did find was if you used permethrin on your pets, you had a little permethrin in your blood system. So, but not from the mosquito fogging route. There was no difference. And then we come back to this mosquito fogging truck. And I think the key thing we need to think about there is it's not necessarily something we need to be doing on a schedule every week, beginning whatever the first week of April and all the way through the end of October or whatever. It's something that's going to do us the most good if we use it when we really need to, when we've got adult mosquitoes present. There's a downside to doing too much of this fogging when you don't need to, because these mosquitoes will become resistant to these insecticides that we're using, and then they won't work when we need them to. So my point there is we need to spray only when mosquitoes are active. That's usually the best time is dusk to early evening, and the point there is that even 7 o'clock in the afternoon is too early in the summer. They don't become active until about 30 minutes before dark. A little at dawn can be useful, and then even then, if it's rainy or high winds, mosquitoes don't fly during high winds. You don't need to even be running the mosquito truck that night, do you? I already mentioned the point of, well, I may not have mentioned this. One question we also have come up is, well, how far away does this fogging truck kill mosquitoes? There's some data to show that it kills mosquitoes about 100 yards on the downwind side of where the truck is running. I'm going to close with what I think are some of my suggestions that I might just throw out to the board for consideration. I've mentioned one is it's a good idea to try to run the fogger truck only when necessary based on some biological information that you can get. Consider getting some detailed input from a trained mosquito manager. I work with insects, but I'm not a 100% full-time mosquito man. If we had a full-time medical entomologist, he would be here tonight instead of me. Y'all are fortunate here in Starkville in that we do have a professor from Mississippi State that retired, who lives here in Starkville, and he consults on mosquito management all through the southeast. And I called him today and asked him if he would be willing to work with Starkville on their mosquito management program, and he indicated he would at no charge if it wasn't an excessive amount of time. So I'll give you that individual's name if you're interested in that. Another suggestion I might have is that I know you probably have personnel to run the trucks and do some of the larvicide applications. You might want to consider hiring somebody just to do surveillance. And there might be an example there of hiring a student out of MSU. We don't have a lot of entomology students that are trained in medical entomology, but you could probably find somebody. They would need to work under the direction of somebody that had a little more biological background. And one of the key things they would need to be doing would be to identify and map breeding sites so that you know where to put those larvicides. So with that, I'll stop, and I'll be glad to field any questions that you might have.
Like, we hear a lot about West Nile, and of course we have a great responsibility as a city to protect our citizens against West Nile. Can you talk a little bit about that, and do all species of mosquitoes carry West Nile? When does it typically start? Those type of things.
I can't remember the exact time frame, but it was about 5 or 6 years ago that West Nile came into the U.S., and then for the next 3 or 4 years we saw a big spread in West Nile virus. What we think's happened now is many of the birds that this thing reservoirs in have become resistant to West Nile. So the incidence is declining. It's still there. We had, I think, 40 or 50 cases in Mississippi last year, if I remember. I don't think there was one in Occidental County last year, if I remember the data correctly. There have been in some previous years. So it's a good example of one mosquito-borne disease, and usually these things, they reservoir in something like birds, usually birds, or some other animal, and then they get transmitted into humans when the mosquito bites the bird and crosses over to us. So there's a real concern there, and of course, interest in mosquito management, of course, intensifies anytime we have one of these outbreaks. There are other mosquito-borne diseases like St. Louis encephalitis, Western equine encephalitis, and other things that are similar to West Nile virus. Some of them even have higher fatality rates or even greater concern.
Thank you. Bill, that brings us down to the bridge that, Mr. Bill Henry wants to build on, that we asked him on Lindbergh.
Mayor, this was a house cleaning matter, we just noted it from the last meeting, they did not, require to dedicate the remaining once the bridge was completed, and so we intend to make sure that was done.
I didn't quite understand that.
What did you say?
It's a house cleaning matter, is what I was saying, at the
Okay.
last meeting, the board accepted, or required the bridge to be built, city spec, required some landscaping, but never required that upon completion it be dedicated to the city.
Okay, so would you like this motion tonight to be for it to be dedicated after it's completed?
The board would so desire.
Do we have a motion that we, accept this bridge and it be dedicated?
Something's your bridge.
Yeah.
It's your bridge.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Subject to, dedication subject to previous conditions placed upon the bridge, appropriate language thereof.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes. Consideration of a ordinance establishing a disability committee. Man, I think this is something that you have great interest in.
It is, and the first thing I'd say is, after feedback from some of the other aldermen and real good recommendations, rather than using an ordinance to create the commission, we'd recommend, and we've put on the desk, that we use a resolution to do so. And the thought process there is, because of this strong legal requirements with an ordinance, you're not able to make the appropriate changes in a more timely fashion, but by establishing this with a resolution, it would in fact simplify things. The resolution itself is to create a commission on disability. The primary roles and responsibilities of this commission on disability would be to advise and assist the city officials in ensuring compliance with federal and state disability laws. It would be to review policies and activities within city departments and boards as they may affect persons with disabilities, and also to provide information, referral, advocacy, and technical assistance to individuals, businesses, and organizations in all matters pertaining to disability. Kind of big picture, we're looking for a commission to have 5 appointed members. The majority of that commission would be people who have a physical disability and or would be either hearing or visually impaired. In addition, the board would appoint a non-voting liaison from the board to the commission. That's something we do, for example, with the airport group, et cetera, just to have very normal communication with the commission. Looking at having 4-year terms so that you'd have a good amount of continuity there. And trying to think of other key points to make. This commission would meet quarterly unless there are specific issues, and they can call a more frequent meeting from there. And then based on the document that's on your table, the only change would be under the adoption, which would be on the next to last page, is rather than putting this like an ordinance into effect 30 days after its passage, in fact would go into full force after its passage, and there wouldn't be a requirement to publish in the newspaper.
So you're putting that in the form of a motion?
Well, if there aren't any other questions from board members, y'all were very gracious to provide feedback to me, so it represents.
And we're striking the last 2 sentences of section 15.
Yes, sir.
So that it would read, this resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after its passage, period, and then eliminate the last sentence. Correct?
Well,
Okay. Then I move that we adopt this resolution to create a commission on disability in the city of Starkville and to designate the operating regulations as well.
Second.
Motion with a second. We've heard the discussion on it. We've had some discussion on it. All those in favor of it, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes.
Before we move on, Mr. Mayor, now that we've passed this, it's now in effect, we need to be about our business of appointing the members to the commission. Wondering if Alderman Cox had any ideas and or suggestions as how we proceed with that.
I would hope at the next board meeting that, we can present we would go ahead and advertise, the establishment of this committee, and people who would be interested would, submit that, interest in writing, and then at the next, board meeting, we'd be able to make those appointments.
So would you like to make a motion authorizing the city clerk to advertise for vacancies on said commission?
What he said. So moved.
The adoption of it and request for indications of interest to serve on the commission.
Okay, did we have that in the form of a motion?
We did.
Okay, all of you have heard the motion. All those
We
in
need a
fa-
second.
We need a second to that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion with a second.
Mayor, would you just real briefly repeat the motion for us, because it went kind of fast?
Repeat it, Matt.
That we would have the, city clerk advertise, the creation of the committee. Thank you. And then for people to express interest in writing to the mayor's office and for consideration at the next board meeting.
To search.
To serve on the committee. Any other changes to the, motion?
Sounds pretty good to me. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Brings us down to consideration of an amendment to the Personnel Policy Manual to clarify procedures and policy pursuant to section 3.112. I think that's one that you have.
Mr. Mayor and Board, the Organization and Operation Committee met recently, and among the items discussed was the need to clarify the procedure in the city's grievance process to make sure that the specific procedures outlined there attempted to blend the grievance process with the specific statutory requirements of state law. We have discussed this at length with City Attorney Faber. You have in your packets a letter from him making certain recommended changes in the language of the city's grievance procedure, again, simply to mesh the requirements of state law with the long-standing steps in the city's grievance process to effect a smoother administration of the policy. And you have in the letter 4 specific changes in the language that was made. And I would move the adoption of the city attorney's recommended changes to the personnel policy. With a second to that, we can discuss it at whatever length you would like to do so.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Do we have any further discussion in regard to this policy change?
Would you like me to summarize that, or
Yes.
is it
Why don't you do
sufficient to do that? The simplest thing to say is that that state law specifies that in this form of government, the Board of Aldermen is the body that is charged with hiring employees and terminating employees. Therefore, in a technical type of sense, a department head of whatever sort does not have the authority to terminate employees. Further, the city's grievance process specifies that the Board of Aldermen sits as the final body to determine the validity of an employee grievance, prior, of course, to any court action that occurred outside of the city's sphere of operation. And so sometimes you were produced with a situation where if the Board of Aldermen is the only group that can terminate an employee, how can they then sit as the final body to rule on an employee grievance, maybe over the termination? So you had that inconsistency or that difficulty in meshing the situation. What this amendment does is to authorize department heads to, if there is an employee that they think needs termination, to recommend termination of an employee. And from that point, the recommended termination will trigger the operation of the city's grievance process if the employee wants to avail himself, herself of the city's grievance process. And so thus what the Board of Aldermen would hear would be the recommended termination of a certain employee for some reason. And thus they could not be the group that does the initial termination, but be the group that hears the department head's recommended termination, thus allowing the better meshing of a somewhat unwieldy grievance process as it operates within the structure of state law.
Any questions?
I think your summary was longer than the actual legally passing.
That it could well have been, Richard.
Okay, we have a motion with a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Brings us down to the report on fuel conservation. Is that you, Ms. Brule?
This is supposed to have been done monthly, so I have to apologize to you. I noted, I was going back over my previous minutes of the board and noted that September the 20th of 2005, I was requested to do this monthly, and I had actually been having Doug Devlin email it to you, so I wanted to go ahead and bring it to you personally now that I know that I've been remiss. Still looking for city trend. We've got May through March, so we're waiting for a full year. And in looking at each one of the departments, you should have that in front of you because Doug completed the analysis at the end of the month and therefore just provided it to us today, so, or yesterday morning, I believe. So you can take a look at it. The trend is still low but trending up again for March, and not quite sure. Obviously, February was a 28-day month, so that decreased the amount of usage in February. And I think each one of the departments are still implementing cost-saving features. We're just awaiting the summer months to see how that's going to play out. Police in particular shows a continual downward trend, as does streets, with a little spike in March. So the police chief indicated that's mostly a personnel issue. He's got officers in the academy and officers in training as well, so that of course reduces the force some. But I will continue to monitor it and continue to bring it to you. And if you still would like it in email as well as in front of the board on a monthly basis, we can do that as well, whatever the board's pleasure.
Ms. Rule, the thing that was pretty exciting in the packet was the work the fire department had done.
Yes.
Can you touch on that just a little bit? I mean, it seems like, when we started this was right during the post-Katrina issues where we were having fuel conservation. And of course, with the price of gas, what it was then and now as it continued to creep back up, we thought this reduction made sense. And not only just to drive less, so to speak, but to hopefully be smarter. And one of those recommendations came from the fire department, and it looks like it's made a real difference.
It seems to be. He continues to see high fuel savings in his vehicles based on the energy fuel cell, which the electric department purchased and is beginning to track and put in their vehicles. And we will hope that with those kinds of numbers in the vehicles that are not that real heavy vehicles, that we'll get a good idea that we can go ahead and implement those citywide and affect some large savings. At the very least, I would hope 25% based on the fire department's numbers.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Recommend it to all the other municipalities as well. Thank you.
Okay, report from O&O.
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, the next two items are O&O matters, and so that would be part of the report. May we just go on and consider those?
Yes.
The Organization and Operation Committee considered a request from Planning Director George Rummel that Sarah McCann in the Building Department be reclassified as the office manager for Building Codes Planning Department in recognition of the actual work and duty that she has within that department. And the O&O committee recommended, the committee decided to recommend to you for consideration the fact that Ms. Sarah McCann be moved from a grade 7 step 2B to a grade 9 step 2B with a reclassification as office manager in the Building Codes Planning Department. You have a memo, you have a job description, you have so forth from Planning Director Rumble, which was what the committee considered and unanimously brings this recommendation to you for your consideration.
You have that in the form of a motion?
I would move that Ms. Sarah McCann be reclassified as the office manager in Building Codes and Zoning Department, and to be moved from a grade 7 step 2B to a grade 9 step 2B in recognition of the work actually being done in that department.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All of you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Next item, please.
Then, Mr. Mayor, also an item considered by the Organization and Operation Committee that has been discussed back and forth with the board and the O&O Committee on several occasions. The trustees or a cemetery board from Oddfellow Cemetery on Highway 182 made a request from the city some months ago that the city consider accepting Oddfellow Cemetery on 182 for perpetual care and maintenance, similar to the care and maintenance being provided for Oddfellow Cemetery on Main Street University Drive. The Organization and Operation Committee brings to you tonight a recommendation that you consider acceptance of Oddfellow Cemetery on 182 for care and maintenance, similar to care and maintenance being provided for Oddfellow Cemetery on University Drive, with a recognition that ultimately still to be decided would be what types of boards would continue to be in existence, this question of cemetery commission, all these things about which we have talked that are not yet decided, are going to have to be decided in conjunction with the existing boards that are administering the two cemeteries. But we wanted to bring to you tonight a recommendation that we accept for care and maintenance the Oddfellow Cemetery on 182, and to do that, of course, the cemetery property would have to be conveyed to the city by warranty deed, free and clear of any liens or exceptions or so forth. And so upon a title opinion done by the city attorney in perhaps cooperation with maybe Rodney, it's Attorney Dalton McAlpin, I think, that has been working with the cemetery trustees. Ms. Self, is that correct?
It is correct, and some of the trustees are here tonight.
Okay, so with that attorney, a proper title search to be sure we're getting the property, and we would recommend the acceptance of this cemetery by the city. Mr. Mayor, perhaps one of the trustees is here. Did he wish to say anything tonight?
Mr. Ashford is here, I believe.
Is Wilson? I didn't see Wilson in the back. Yeah.
Well, I think you have all the information.
Thank you, Ms. Dash. So I would move acceptance of the cemetery on Highway 182 for care and maintenance equivalent to cemetery on University Drive, subject to the title opinion and delivery of a proper warranty deed without exception and so forth.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes.
Mayor and Board, now that we've heard the recommendations from the Organization and Operations Committee, and after some consideration on it, I would like to make a motion that we disband the Organization and Operations Committee.
I'll second.
We have a motion to disband the O and O committee. Do we have any discussion at this time?
Richard is certainly full of interesting proposals tonight.
Do you have a reason that you would like to share?
Really, just a couple of procedural concerns, but also a concern that it overall tends to slow down certain government processes that we do and sort of drag on and cause some things that we could handle in a couple of board meetings to take much longer than they necessarily have to. So it's been my own personal observation that we would be better suited without it. So that's why I made that motion. We got a second, and I'd like to call the question.
Well, we're not through quite with discussion, Richard, before you call the question. Alderman Davis?
While I understand Alderman Corey's concerns, and it would seem to me that this is an awful abrupt step to take at this particular junction, because the committee does serve a valuable function if it were to operate correctly. Now, the dissolution with the committee or dissolvement of the committee in and of itself, I don't think is appropriate at this time. I don't think that certain things that have gone through that committee should be placed on that committee's agenda. However, I will say that it will serve and continue to serve a valuable function for us to alleviate work here at this board table and handle certain situations that do come up before us. I think this move is a bit drastic and a bit premature.
Well, it's not something I just decided tonight. It's something I've considered for several months, actually, but I stand beside my motion.
And I would add, contrary to Alderman Corey's assertion, the Organization and Operation Committee is able to study and give careful consideration to items, and indeed does not slow the process, but in many cases speeds the process.
Any other discussion?
I would like to say, I guess I'm as shocked as anybody at Alderman Corey's motion that we disband the O and O committee. And I agree that some of the things that maybe go to the committee that we could handle, but a prime example of all of the work that it took on the last item we just voted on, the acceptance of the Oddfellows Cemetery, all the work that went into that, we would have never, and students, excuse me, never ever, let you know I know better, we would have never ever worked through that sitting here at this board table, and I appreciate the work that the O&O committee did to get this ready to bring to us. So I say no. I can tell you I will vote against your motion.
Any other discussion?
I don't see any reason why the last issue was brought up about the cemetery. I don't understand why it couldn't have been discussed and voted on and a decision made in an open meeting. I don't see anything to hide about it. So many times that I've seen here, if we could have had a discussion, moved on with it, and voted on the issue, and we elect to jump and throw it in a dark hole, and sometimes we have to look for this again, or we never see it. So would be voting to abolish the O&O committee.
We'll do this vote by a show of hands. All those in favor of abolishing O&O, please raise your hand. All those opposed to this, please raise your hand. I vote to abolish it.
Mr. Mayor, in like token then, I think we should make a motion where our budget committee meets to formulate a municipal budget, present to the board, and then in emergency situations, not on a regular basis, where they're rehashing decisions that have already been made and placed in the budget, and having presentations made ad nauseum to them. And I make that in the form of a motion.
Would you repeat your motion?
I move that the Budget Committee only meet in times of budget preparation for an upcoming fiscal year and to make a presentation to the Board of Aldermen and/or emergency situations where things are referred from the Board of Aldermen to that committee and not in ad hoc meetings called ad nauseum.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion of the Budget Committee's motion? We will now vote on that. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, 3. All those opposed to that motion, raise your hand. And I vote with opposed to that motion.
I would simply point out we're having lots of fun tonight in Alderman's Perkins' absence. You can expect to see reconsideration of all these matters at the next meeting.
That's fine.
Well, I can see some of the aldermen can't take opposition.
Could you explain that statement?
And some reside in a dark hole.
That's so true. Some of us can't.
We'll move on. This brings us up to discussion of trash removal. Mr. Cox, I believe this is something that you asked to be put on here.
I did, Mr. Mayor. The city currently outsources its rubbish collection. When we think of rubbish, for most of us, it means leaves, limbs, etc. And of course, this rubbish collection is one of the basics of the services that the city provides. I'd recommend that going forward, the management of that rubbish collection be managed under the Landscape Division, under the direction of Doug Devlin, Public Services Director. The thought being that we need to coordinate when we go out and we pick up leaves and limbs, that we coordinate the street sweeper. We also have equipment within that department that potentially allows us to manage additional pickups where necessary, and would do that in the form of a motion.
Could I ask Ms. Brule to maybe speak maybe to some of that? With that, did you do that?
Yes, sir. Alderman Cox explained his ideas this afternoon, and I haven't had a lot of time to think about it, but I would like to ask the board to reconsider, not to consider this at this point in time, and take under advisement, shall we say, until the next board meeting, at least until I can determine the issues involved. Attorney Faber and I and Sharon Boyd have been looking at the contract, which is somewhat unclear in the requirements of the recycling company, and we're trying to determine at this point in time, we're trying to establish what their actual requirements are. We seem to have some complaints, we have a folder that's getting somewhat thicker regarding complaints and pickup and that sort of thing, and while I think Mr. Chairman will simply do his best, I think the contract is sufficiently unclear that he's currently not in compliance, because it doesn't state an amount that he is only supposed to pick up 20 cubic yards, which is my understanding, I believe he has at this point in time. But the 4 points of the contract indicates that there is no total amount that he can pick up, so anything that's out there should be something he's picking up. And rather than come to him and say that, what I wanted to do is research the contract and see where we might be working. And I would rather than pass off an unclear contract to Mr. Devlin to try to enforce or try to get into, Boyd is into it and has been into it for a while, and we're still in the point of researching it. So I would ask the board to hold off on that, at least give me another couple of weeks, so she can get back from Las Vegas and get her mind back on sanitation business. I think it's still a nice fit under there. I don't think there's a problem. This board has something that goes out after there have been some concerns, complaints about oversized rubbish areas that Mr. Sherman sends that information to Ms. Boyd. She sends Calvin out to look at it, seeing it's a little oversized. Some of those issues need to be thrashed out, and I would like to do that before we get to the point of shifting a problem under Doug Devlin. Let's see if we can't cure what we consider to be problems now before we move it somewhere else. So I would just ask the board at least do what it does occasionally, and that's take something under advisement before we act on it.
Ms. Sproul, I have a couple of concerns about moving it to landscaping, because if I'm not mistaken, last year, weren't they several weeks behind in just their own work, let alone working to have to help negotiate it or maintain a contract?
Well, landscaping, because of the weather, landscaping fell behind, I think 3 or 4 weeks in just the mowing. And so I'm not sure how much Doug considered he had to ramp up in order to
back on March the 24th, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I received a call about a bunch of limbs piled on West Point Road. And I called Miss Boyd and asked her, was she aware of all the brush was piled on the side of the street on West Point Road? And she immediately said, yes, I understand it is. I've sent so-and-so out there to do this and this and this. And now this is a contractor's responsibility to pick this up. And she quoted me according to the contract. She said, this is Stan Sheridan's responsibility to pick this up and remove it. So I called Mr. Sheridan and I said, Mr. Sheridan, do you know anything about the piles of tops and cedar bushes and so forth on West Point Road? And he said, yes, I do. He said, I have asked Ms. Boyd for a purchase order to remove this because it exceeds what my contract says. I said, well, is there anything that you can do about it? He said, yes, I can handle it. So in the process, I got a call about 20 minutes later, and they said the landfill has been closed. We'll have to get somebody to open the landfill to dump the tops. I called Ms. Boyd back, and she said, it's after hours. You'll have to talk to Doug Devlin. Okay. I called Doug Devlin. He said, okay, give me 15 minutes and I'll have somebody out there and open the gates. So in a matter of less than probably 2 hours, all of this was loaded on trucks, carried out there and back. Now, I want everybody to understand what the next move was. Mr. Sheridan sent the city a bill for $525 for removing trash at 3 different lot locations there. And when Miss Boyd received this invoice, she turned around and sent it back to the contractor, Mr. Sheridan, and said, you will have to put on the bottom of this invoice, this was an order by Jim Mills. So his secretary, not of his knowing, wrote on there, instructed by Jim Mills to move this. My point is, we've been talking about this contract for at least 5 or 6 months. And I discussed this yesterday or today with Ms. Pruill, and we keep hearing the contract. We keep hearing the contract. But the fact is that Mr. Sheridan took it on himself. Nobody instructed him to do anything. He was just only asked if he was aware of this and what could he do about it. That is not an instruction or a command to do anything. And in 2 hours, he had accomplished what everybody on this board and the administration of this city should want to accomplish, is getting the place cleaned up and forget about the politics of whose responsibility of a contract. And I don't understand why that we cannot read a contract and get between people like a contractor and a department head and solve this and quit every week having the same discussion about the contract. And that's why I would be in favor of putting somebody else in charge of the contract to negotiate with Mr. Sheridan and get the job done and quit talking about it.
Does that mean you second his motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Matt made a motion that we,
Motion was to have the rubbish contract be managed under the landscaping division
through.
Ms. Brewer, you're asking for a little bit more time for Ms. Boyd to get back and have a proper discussion of this as opposed to ambush, if you will, while she's out of town.
I think there are, we've had a meeting, Attorney Favor, Boyd and I had a meeting last week, we looked at the contract, because that's what we operate with. Four corners of the contract is what we have to deal with. And it seems to have some, ambiguities in it that we'd like to clear up, because it stands right now, Mr. Shurton would have picked those up without sending us an invoice of any kind. So that being the case, then there's clearly some misunderstanding about the obligations on his part and ours. So rather than pass off some ambiguities to Mr. Devlin to have to deal with, why not go ahead and deal with it as we currently have it running, and we can certainly do that within the next 2 weeks. Or next week.
And all I'll say is, perhaps, as this meeting deteriorates, we suspend with some of the niceties. All I care about is having the rubbish picked up, and I consider this to be the best way to resolve the concerns that residents of my ward have expressed to me vis-a-vis this, and that's what my best faith effort is, and I've discussed this with other aldermen earlier today. But there's a motion on there, and if there's a request to table it, I certainly would entertain that. But my interest is just making sure that the rubbish is picked up as it's supposed to be. That's my only interest.
And that is ours as well, but we still have to operate within the contract.
And I would certainly not be saying that the transfer should not be made. I'm not making that argument at all. I just think all the parties to the situation ought to be present to discuss what the ramifications are before any decision is made.
We have a motion and a second that we transfer the responsibility of the liaison person to the landscape department. We've heard both sides that we delay this for when all parties are here. We will first vote on the motion that we do an immediate transfer. All those in favor, please show your hand, if you would. 2. All those opposed? 4. Now, do we have a motion that we would discuss this, or do we even need one?
No, I think it ought to just proceed under the normal process, and we will schedule it, I assume, for the next board meeting.
Should.
Is that satisfactory, Alderman Carter?
Yes.
Mayor, it's 7:22.
Okay, we're gonna take a break at this particular point. When we come back, we'll pick up with the office of the city clerk. We have, to the general public, we will go into a personnel mode of where we will be interviewing probably for the next 25 or 30 minutes. And we will reconvene in here after our interview.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
We have a motion and a second that to repeat your motion one more time. I can't hear you down here. I need Barb Mills' hearing aid.
Move approval of the claims docket and the financial statements for the month of February based upon the recommendation of our city clerk, Ms. Marquita Outlaw.
Okay. Do we have a second to that?
A second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it passes. Go ahead.
We accepted proposals from 2 insurance vendors, and do we have those in the package?
They're in the package.
The lowest bidder was Galloway Chandler McKinney, and I recommend that the board accept their proposal.
Ms. Outlaw, before board votes, is there any significant change from the policy that you know of, from the policy that was in place previous? Was this the company that provided the insurance before?
No, but the company that provided the insurance did give them, everything that they had. So the quotes should be based on what we already have.
Okay, so what you're telling the board then, there's been no significant change in the coverage that's provided to the city by these insurance?
That's correct.
This insurance company?
That's correct.
I don't think previously it was bid, it was basically rolled over, wasn't it?
Yes, last year we just kept on with the same company.
Marquita, how many bids were received for the insurance? Two from Galloway, Chandler, McKinley, and
Reynolds.
Did we have a copy of the Reynolds proposal?
Yeah,
Am I-
last year it was about that big, so I didn't provide you there.
Um,
It's changed about difference was about $18,000, so.
Identical coverage. Based upon those representations, then I would move that we accept the low bid of Galloway, Chandler, and McKinley for furnishing the city's property insurance.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, Ms. Outlaw. Thank you.
I have, we received 16 applications for our accounts payable position. 6 applicants were interviewed. The interview committee consisted of myself, the administrative assistant in the city clerk's office, Ms. Emma Gandy, and the city accountant, Ms. Debbie Clark. And based upon the recommendation of the committee, I recommend and request that the board approve the hiring of Ms. Sherette Taylor at a grade 8, step 1. The annual salary is $22,037.38. With 1 year probation and satisfactory evaluation on the mandated drug screen.
Ms. Outlaw, could you share with us a little bit about how many people you interviewed and who was on the committee? Y'all did
It was 16 applicants and we interviewed 6 applicants. And the committee was myself, Ms. Emma Gandy, and Ms. Clark.
certainly appreciate that hard work, and I'd move that we accept the recommendation and authorize the hiring of Sheriff Taylor into municipal service as an accounts payable clerk at a grade 8, step 1, which is $22,037.38 with the appropriate probation period.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Passes. Thank you, Ms. Outlaw.
Thank you.
Ed, are you back there?
Mayor and Board, I would request that be allowed to send our system engineer, Jason Horner, to a line design and staking training course in Nashville from April 18th through April 20th this year.
So moved.
We have a motion to accept this. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Go ahead, Ed.
I would also request authorization for electric department accountant Katie Gents to attend the Southeastern Data training conference in Amelia Island, Florida, which is from June 19th through June 21 of this year. This will, by her attending this training course, should have, be able to pick up a lot of knowledge that she would be useful when we finish our conversion or starting on our conversion to the new computerized system.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I would request authorization to fill 2 vacant groundman positions and also to fill 1 vacant crew chief position. These have been vacant for quite a few months now. Request would be allowed to advertise for this.
I move that authorization to advertise for the vacant positions, crew chief and groundsman, be approved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Finally, Mayor and Board, we took bids on construction material to be utilized in extending a new feeder circuit from Sand Road over to South Montgomery. We had quite a few vendors to submit bids, and you should have a copy of bids and highlighted on the bids that would be the lowest and best bids. And I would recommend that we be allowed to accept and purchase this material for a total cost of $201,337.13.
Is this one of those items that would help the brownout situation?
Yes, this should take care of it.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, Edward.
Thank you.
Brings us down to engineering and streets. Bill, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Got a couple of items. No room, but items. First item, in your packet is, an application for a pay request by Ellis Construction Company for taxiway improvements at the airport, Georgia and Brownfield. This is a relocation of the north taxiway related to drainage and, lighting. The request has been approved by both the engineer for the project, Mr. Harden, as well as the airport board last night. We recommend approval of their invoice in the amount of $365,206.53. Both Mr. Harden and Mr. is here to answer the questions. Mr. Rodney.
I would move approval of payment of pay request number 4 in the amount of $365,206.53 to Ellis Construction Company for the taxiway relocation, Georgia and Brownfield.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Rodney, do we end up getting reimbursed? When do we get the reimbursement from the government on the 97.5%?
Ahead of time.
Okay, and is that what our plan is? Okay, thanks.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, Bill.
The second item is a feasibility study for locating Justice Complex on the old Coke property on Highway 12 versus the municipal court building being on Lafayette and the police department on the corner of South Jackson and Lamping Street. At your request, I went back and took Mr. Schaefer's numbers and tried to put them together for both sites. Highway 12 site, of course, it would be the same floor plan as we had originally that we did a study on Bill Stark's property, with both of them being on the same piece of property and 2 buildings that were connected by an adjoining wing. The coke plant site had very little site work to be done on it. The cost, of course, went up on parking. The land was higher, and we had to provide all the parking for the full complement of cars that we have been anticipating. And the Lafayette Street site and the South Jackson Street site, if you recall, we were putting the minimum amount of parking in there. The 63 secure parking for the police and a very minimum amount of parking in the court facility and utilizing the Jefferson Street parking lot and on the police department, the parking lot on Lincoln Street there across from the old Van Lanningham building. I did add some money in the site development for both of the properties on Lafayette and on South Jackson because of the fact that there's a grade separation problem on the Lafayette Street site. There's about 6 to 8 foot of difference in elevation that'll have to be attributed to accounted for, and I did add some money in the site prep over what Mr. Schaefer had in his as well as put some money in there in case there was any asbestos in either of the buildings that we have to tear down on both sides. But the bottom line, as I came up with it, is that it would be economically more feasible, I guess you would, to build the two separate buildings based strictly on the numbers that we have because of the different land cost and the parking required. It's going to be about $500,000 to $600,000 difference. Lower price for the Lafayette Street site and the South Jackson Street site versus the Highway 12. Anybody got a question?
One of the questions that had been asked of me is that with the old bus station and auto body there on the corner of Lafayette and Jackson, is about environmental cleanup. Specifically, are there gas tanks in the ground and those type of issues? If you looked into that, and
I did. Ms. Coxon, according to the EPA or DEQ's records in Jackson, the tanks at that site were removed, I think, in '93. So there's no environmental problem caused by the tanks being there on that site. Now there are tanks still in the ground on the corner of 82 and Lafayette Street where we were talking about putting the electric part, but there's none in either one of these projects. So we're looking at basically, the bottom line is $8.8 million for the Highway 12 site and a total of $8.2 million roughly for the other two sites, given the parameters I mentioned.
That's not quite right. You said 8 versus 8.2 for the other two sites combined. One would be 8.6. 8.6.
Or 8.8, actually.
8.8, right.
8.84 versus 8.2.
Bill, a number of things here that puzzle me a little bit. We've gone, of course, from January of '04 with roughly a $5 million cost estimate to now the 8 point whatever you said here at this point in time. Construction costs and so forth have increased that much since January of '04.
Well, not completely construction costs because $1.5 million or $1 million to $1.5 million in both of these cases were purchased land.
And where did you get the land acquisition cost figure?
That was the cost that was given to me to use to figure these.
Given to you by who?
The mayor in this school. And although I did talk to the people that own the Lafayette Street site, and I actually got what their asking price was for them. Of course, that's their asking price. So we have it appraised.
And of course, it appears that when you get down to the bottom line, and you look through this, the difference in the cost is the juggling of the parking, specifically building the 170 spaces at the Highway 12 site, not building the comparable number of spaces at the other sites, and that's what makes the major difference in the cost differences, is it not?
Yes, pretty much.
There's a difference in the land. You're talking about $1 million down here, you're talking about $150,000 down here. That's $1,150,000. You're talking about this other land is costing almost $1.5 million. So there's a lot of difference in the cost of the land.
But the basic difference is the parking
Oh, there's no question.
between the two, that's the parking.
Absolutely no question.
Where you're
And we would be
furnishing it.
foolish not to use something we already have.
Where you're furnishing it in one site and not furnishing
That's
it
right.
in the other.
No question.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, the cost of land listed on the municipal complex on Highway 12 was 1.109 on the cost figure that was provided.
That is if you'll notice, I split that up based on the square footage
Okay,
between
so there's another
the
one
two
down there,
uses.
okay, that's fine. I do have a question, though, about the municipal court on Lafayette Street side. You did not include the cost of a sally port for that facility?
There was no Sally Port.
I think it was, wasn't it, about $1 million and something that he came up with, and part of that was a Sally Port.
There was, I don't have a Sally Port in the one he gave me.
Is that right?
And also,
I know
there's-
they talked about it at the last meeting, but.
Right,
they never
and so,
crossed it out.
if it's not included, you could assume that you would add another roughly $300,000 to the cost of that building down on Lafayette Street to put a Sally Port in, because that's what it's gonna cost on the police, or those, is that a fair assumption?
I would think so, yes. I don't know if we're gonna, talking about the same size Sally Port for the court, or I would think. it
Well,
would
that's
be
why I'm
smaller.
asking, would that be how much it would cost?
I would
to
say
add?
at the most,
And then also, the numbers that you worked with on the Lafayette Street Municipal Court building, do not include the same holding facilities that we had programmed in the Highway 12 site, because we were conceivably gonna share that facility between the two departments, and it would seem logical that we'd have to construct a holding facility for municipal court, so we don't have the situation where we have here in this courtroom and prisoners sitting out in the courtroom itself. So would that not be another cost that would have to be added to that building?
again, I got these figures from Mr. Schaefer, and I would assume that he figured that in his square footage when he split the two up, that both.
And one went, because I see it in the police, numbers for the split facility, but not in the court numbers, and I'm just curious as to, if that would be another, additional cost that should be added to these figures.
But you're saying you don't know for sure.
I don't know for sure. I took his numbers and just went basically on the site, parking and that kind of issue. I can investigate that and get back with you if you want like.
We do seem to have some cost things that might be floating here.
I'll do that.
Well, it sounds like, at the end of this, the costs are gonna be pretty comparable, between the two. And ultimately, it'll be up to the board to make a decision. It doesn't sound like we'll have an easy one to say that this is, $100,000 cheaper from this side or the other. We're gonna have to make a management decision about the location, whether we wanna accept the recommendation of, the police department and the judge on having separate facilities or having a combined facility. And then, of course, a separate, question around, do we want this to be in the heart of the community or on on the Highway 25? And there's good reasons for all of those, and it seems appropriate with the fact that we still have some of these questions. Would it be possible that these questions could be answered as early as Monday the 10th? And what I was thinking there is that we could potentially have a town hall meeting, and we could present the full information that you've presented here, have Mr. Schaefer participate, so that I look at this as a marathon, and I've run several of them, and in fact, the first 20 miles of a marathon are easy compared to the last 6 miles, and that's where we are. We've hit the wall, and now it's time to really make the tough decisions and to move forward, and it would seem appropriate that we, especially with Alderman Perkins not being here, to ask his questions and to hear this information, it would be to call a town hall meeting for Monday, April the 10th, to have this information be presented more fully to the public, to go over all these cost figures, look at the designs that Mr. Schaefer has put forward to this board, and then because Alderman Davis will be out of the board on the 18th to potentially then schedule a special meeting for the board to make a decision based on those questions being answered that were asked here, as well as the public being given an opportunity to express their thoughts on the location of this facility.
I think they're either already in there, or he should be able to come up with them based on the numbers that he had previously, as far as the South Port, also the other item that was questioned. So I think we can have it easily by. Now, granted, I don't know if he's gonna have any drawings to show, because if you recall, what he gave us was the sketches, looked kind of freehand things that he put on there, and I don't know whether he's refined that any or not, as far as being ready for show and tell next Monday.
Right.
But not necessarily a requirement.
Well, yeah.
You know, we certainly think, and I would agree, having talked about this, that a public forum, a public hearing would be good for an expression of interest on the part of the public in different proposals and thoughts and so forth. We have determined that the overriding concern, I think, is that we need a police facility, we need a court facility. And given that overriding concern, some of the other things become secondary, and we simply need to avoid any criticism that this was not properly aired with the public, so we can start building consensus around the cost, the financing, the need for these facilities.
Well, I think we can, given that understanding, we can probably put it together next month.
I would like to make one statement in regard to cost. Is that the cost that came back for the airport area out there before it ever became public was gonna run in excess of $6 million. And that was before Katrina. That came from the architect's own mouth. That did not include the cost that was gonna be paid to the airport. That did not include the frontage road, that was gonna be several $100,000, I believe, wasn't it? And did not include the abandonment of the lane that was that the airport encompassed. So, you know, we sit here, your remarks were, well, we're certainly not in the $5 million. No, we never were. I mean, this thing was going to exceed $6.2 million to begin with if you built what they had probably had suggested to start with.
Well, of course, Dan, that's an opinion. It wasn't bid and it wasn't built. I didn't realize we were back talking about that other site anyway.
Well, you mentioned it earlier.
I mentioned cost.
Well, you mentioned $5 million, and it was not going to be
Cost.
built for $5 million.
Well, that, of course, is an opinion.
Well, that was the architect's opinion. We certainly put a lot of emphasis on his opinion tonight.
And questioning some of the figures.
Well, like a marathon, it's awfully good to see the finish line. And what I'd like to do is to propose that, in the form of a motion, that we call for a public hearing for Monday, April the 10th at 5:30 at the Greensboro Center, or 6 o'clock, or a time to be specified.
Let's do 6.
6 o'clock to be, to not only have the questions answered that were asked tonight, but also to have a full presentation so that the public is able to see what we've seen over the past several months, and then also to plan on having a special called board meeting potentially on April the 20th, and that date is subject to revision based on consideration of people's calendars, but the importance that people see that there is a goal and an end line for this discussion, so we can move on with these much needed facilities.
Do you have any problem with us getting Rex Buffington if he's willing to facilitate this?
I tell you, they did a fantastic job at the last discussion.
We have a motion.
I'll second it with one stipulation, that we as a board quit beating the dead horse of the airport properties and that project, and realize that it doesn't make a hill of beans as where we are today in April of 2006. We have the issues we have, and it's gonna cost what it's gonna cost. Let's move on.
We have a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or let's raise our hands. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. All those opposed? 5 for it. Thank you, Bill. Go on to your next item, if you would, I believe it's your.
Next item is the drainage and street overlay project. Hopefully at your desk, there is a map similar to this. There's one on the wall. It doesn't show up quite as well as I had hoped it to do, so but we gave a small map that if you look as in the red lines that are broader than regular street lines, those are streets that were paved back in '04 at our last street overlay program. The black lines that are on there are proposed streets to be paved this year or early next year. The ones with numbers on them and circles around them, those are areas that correspond to drainage projects that are listed on a separate sheet. This is just a regular 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with a, I can get mine out here. This sheet here is numbered, that correspond to the numbers that are on these, that point to these circles, that are locations and description of what the work that we're planning on doing or recommending doing. What I would like for you to do is to take this, look it over, and come back to me with comments. Since I've been sitting here waiting on y'all to get through an interview, and I found one street that went plumb out in the county that was drawn in by mistake, so there are some things that we need to maybe move around, or there's some suggestions that you might want a street rather than the ones that we've numbered for us to look at and see if we want to add that or possibly take one off. I was instructed to come up with a street overlay program, not to rebuild any street or widen any, but to overlay, and that is what I attempted to do. There could be an argument for any street in town might need an overlay if you wanted to go that way, but we wrote every street in town, hopefully we did, and made an assessment of them, and this is the list that we've got. There's 4 pages of it. I would ask that you look it over real carefully and call me and tell me what your thoughts are, or write it down, or make a note and give it to me, and we'll adjust it. Maybe talk about it again next board meeting.
I'm assuming this list is somewhat of a carryover from lists done previously where priorities were placed on roads because of traffic condition, those sorts of things.
That's exactly right. Most of a good many of these are left over from the last time that was what we called then our number 2 priorities. And then we added a good many of them in there that we had a pretty bad winter as far as roads were concerned because it was wet and cold. And we had some roads that weren't on that list that we felt needed to be put on there, so they are on there also. But if you would, look that over and let me know what your thoughts are on any that may be in your ward, or whether it's in your ward or not, if you think it needs to be made.
I don't think a formal motion is necessary, just a report. We'll move along.
Bill, just one quick question, and you may have said it, under the drainage projects, you have them listed in number. Was that any type of order? It was just...
No,
Just to help the location on the map.
Perfect, thank you.
And we tried to put down just about every drainage condition that we have had complaints or problems with over the past so many years on that list, but they're in no certain order.
Great work. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a change order, authorization to approve change order number 1 to the elevated storage tank on Azalea Lane. This actually is a deduct of $4,926. It's resulting from a combination of 2 things. One is that some work that was in the contract that when the city ran our system or our lines up to it, we got there before they did, and we ended up putting some valving in at the end of our lines that if they had got there first, they would have put the valves in. So that's the bulk of the deduction, is for that valving that we furnished. And there was an small addition to some work for extending the overflow pipe a little further than we originally intended, so that it gave a better result when it hit the ground. So we recommend approval of the change order number one for $4,926 deduct in that contract.
Do we have a motion?
I would move approval of proposed change order number one for the elevated storage tank on Azalea Lane, tank number 5.
Do we have a second? I hear somebody grumble down there.
Was that second?
All those in favor, please, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Bill, go to you next.
Last item is a little bit more confusing because this is actually in your packet, we sent a resolution that the Golden Triangle Regional Solid Waste Authority made declaring the necessity of requiring mandatory flow control of solid waste within the boundaries of our region. Now, what that means is that they see the need to restrict waste from leaving our district or our region to 6 counties that make up the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority. And the reason for that is we need that waste carried to our landfill out at the intersection of 45 and Old West Point Road, because when we set the landfill up, borrowed money, built it, it was on an estimated amount of tonnage. And we're doing real well. We've got more tonnage than the estimated is continuing to be a good investment. What we're afraid of is that 60% of the commercial waste in this area are carried or hauled by a private contractor. And he's now carrying it to us. But if in the event he were to be bought out by one of the private the big boys, then they could carry it to their landfill because we don't have a mandatory flow control. All this is and every city and every county is being asked to do this. We agreed to do this when we joined the authority to have flow control if it needed to be done. And we're doing this as we're doing it before we really need it so that we don't have to fight it out with these big haulers if and when they ever challenge us. And what we would like for you to do tonight is to set a public hearing for the next board meeting, and I'll come back to you with a resolution to amend to adopt an ordinance requiring, and a copy of what they recommend is in your packet also, to require mandatory flow control for solid waste in the boundaries of the Golden Triangle Solid Waste Authority.
I would move that a public hearing be scheduled for the April 18, 2006 recess meeting to discuss the matter of possible adoption of an ordinance concerning flow control within the city of Starkville as it relates to our participation in the Golden Triangle Regional Solid Waste Management Authority.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Fire Department?
Mayor and Board, we have 3 items. The first one is request authorization for Lieutenant Charles Yarber to attend the National Fire Academy. It's no cost to the city other than a meal ticket.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it.
The other one is to hire 3 certified temporary full-time firefighters that were previously approved for advertisement, and they are Patrick Wayne Hall, Chris Jean McCarter, and Bowman Templeton Shelton. And we went through background checks, did the testing. Interview board consisted of the 3 battalion chiefs, Godin, Kinsella Hampton,
Terry Doss, Captain Andy Sharp, Lieutenant Ricky Williams, Lieutenant Roosevelt Harris, and Training Officer Keith Kindard, and we will start them at a grade 5, step 3 at $25,250.16.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, passes.
The last one is, we ask that you allow us to advertise for a fire inspector. This is the fire marshal position that was created through the MSU contract. We advertised for fire marshal. Nobody was qualified, and so we're stepping back to hire that fire inspector as we had to the last time. We'll actually interview and hire a fire inspector, and he will go through training, and later on we will promote him to a fire marshal.
Chief, would there be any issues with the contract? I can't remember if it was stated that we'd have a fire marshal or if we'd have a fire inspector. Would we have any issues with that contract if we do this?
I don't see any. I mean, that person will do what a fire marshal will do. His qualifications won't be as high, but we will supervise him with 2 other fire marshals, so I don't see where it'd be an issue.
He's just talking about, Chief, does the contract, I can't remember specifically, require a fire marshal as opposed to a fire inspector?
It does say that we will hire a fire marshal.
Could we not rotate one of our current marshals on?
We can,
to that,
yeah,
and
we can do that.
Hire this one to replace
Yeah.
back and promote up?
We can do that.
I would move approval of the court request to advertise for the fire inspector.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Parks and Rec.
Mayor, Board, we're about to begin plans to convert a property at the corner of Whitfield Street and Avenue of the Patriots into a neighborhood park. And through an urban forestry grant that will pay up to 75% of the cost of buying trees and planting those trees and landscaping that area for us, we solicited 5 companies to give us a quote on what it would cost to put those trees in and plant them and get those trees. Of the 5 we asked for quotes, only 1 responded. Gene Merkel at Phillips Design Group gave a quote of $3,270, which Parks and Recreation will be responsible for $817.50 to have those trees installed and begin the landscaping and the conversion of that property. And I'm here to have you approve that $3,270, of which we will pay $817.50.
Be happy to move approval. My only
Of course, the question is, why are you bringing it here as opposed to the Park Commission approving this?
Well, the Park Commission was not, we weren't aware of this urban forestry grant until just a few days ago. And if the project isn't completed by April 15th, you don't get the funds. So this was kind of a rushed together thing to try to get approved at the 12th hour, so to speak, to try to get that 75% grant.
My question is, why did the Park Commission approve it as opposed to the Board of Aldermen, which is the normal procedure? We've had this conversation, I don't know how many times.
Believe
before.
me, I know
Now,
that. Nobody knows that more than me.
Unless there are some issues with an urban forestry grant that requires city approval and signing and so forth, I don't know.
I don't.
Doug, didn't we do all that with that other urban forestry grant we got?
But that wasn't Park Commission. But still not Park Commission, we're talking entity and supervision here. That's not the issue. It's the issue is that the Park Commission can approve this, and it doesn't have to come to the Board of Aldermen unless there's some sort of
When's your
issue of
board
which I'm
meeting next?
unaware.
The next meeting is the first Monday in May.
Of course, you could have called a special meeting.
Well, yes, sir, we could have. That could have been done.
That's not the point.
Yeah, it's not the point of the $300.
Go ahead.
Clark, can you call Scott, y'all get together very quickly and get this done before the 15th?
Absolutely. No problem.
Is is there any misunderstanding about what needs to come to the Board of Aldermen, which is not anything except your budget request?
Well, there has been, yes. We have had some misunderstandings as to things that even our board approves, we have to come and get this board's ratification.
We don't have to do that.
Well, that would be fine. That's good.
It's the role of a park commission statutorily established by law.
I'm not
Where have you been hearing this?
Well, no, I've told him that because the park commission governs him, you govern me. And in order for us to write those claims, pay those warrants, it has to be ratified by this board.
We approve the claims, do we not?
Yes.
Okay, that gives you the authority to pay the claims.
But she has to approve the $817.50 that we would be contributing to this program, and I think I'm saying it right, that she can't pay those bills unless you get ratification. We have a problem here, but
Well, we don't have a problem. We have just a little misunderstanding of this.
I can accept that.
And would the board's approval of this resolve the problem?
Oh, yeah, I assume so. Yes.
Do we have a motion that we,
It doesn't address what Alderman McLaurin's talking about.
And I understand what he's talking
But if you'll remember when we wrestled with this very issue a couple of years ago, the Park Commission and the city agreed to run their financial matters through the city. If you remember.
Certainly, I
And we
remember
said-
that has nothing to do with the statutory authority of who approves what.
I understand. The point becomes,
Well, point becomes that I am under the impression or have been told, and I understand her point, that I have to get ratification from y'all so that she's covered with paying of the bill. That's the way
but
that it's been.
this will become just another claim on our docket that would have
Exactly.
approved it.
We settled this matter with Vivian Marquita some years ago when the same thing came up. We talked to the AG's office, we talked to the State Department of Audit, and here we go again.
And I certainly don't have an issue. I'm just trying to follow the procedure.
when can you call your board into session?
I can telephone them in the morning. By phone, I can get
Authorization, go ahead and start
Authorization.
this?
Yes, sir.
Good, do that in the morning.
absolutely.
Thank you. And then put it on the claims docket. We'll approve it.
Just one thing that's
Yes, sir.
lost is, this is fantastic. I mean, the landscaping that's gonna be done on that corner is gonna get tremendous benefit, so.
It's going to dress it up, and then, of course, there are future plans for a playplex, some benching, some accent lighting, and thus, of course, these plans won't be put into process until we confer with Alderman Davis down there, because that's his ward.
Right.
But it's just going to be a small neighborhood park with merely some benches, a picnic table, and playplex.
Right now, we're talking about trees.
Yeah, but the trees is the first
Right.
thing.
It's only too bad Alderman Perkins isn't here to see this evening.
And you're correct in all of this, that's laws, which ought to be the main thing publicized, beautification of a spot.
Right.
But let's settle this other stuff.
I'm all for
Real
settling this
tired
other
of
stuff,
this.
sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Chief.
Clark. Appreciate it.
I have a question, so that I will be clear on what I heard here. So we are saying, we as the board, we are saying tonight that no more requests will have to come to us from the Park Commission in order for Ms. Outlaw to go ahead and pay the claims that they submit to her.
Right, as long as those claims appear on the documents that we approve, which they do, the claims docket, do they not? Okay?
So it just seems
And
that
that
we've
is
had a
authorization to pay.
misunderstanding here. Okay, so it's clear now.
Okay.
Okay, does that resolve your question?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on. Chief?
And that is request authorization to allow Sergeant Mark Ballard and Staff Support Technician Melody Dewberry permission to attend an out-of-state grant writing seminar in Bentonville, Arkansas, May 9th through 10th.
Second.
We have a motion to approve it with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you.
So we make some
That's right. I love it.
Just one item tonight, Mayor and Board. You have before you a resolution that we would like your approval tonight. And what this is just a resolution allowing Mayor Camp to sign and execute documents related to a revolving loan fund that would go with the ARC and the CDBG grant should we get them, so that we can fund the sewer collection system project up in the Rock Hill area. And briefly, I just gave you just an outline of how much funding is potentially we can get from the two grant authorities. And then we don't have the cash flow in the city to pay the balance. So if we're going to do this project, we're going to have this loan. Terms are 2.75% financing, and repayment period can be up to 20 years.
This would go in hand with the CDBG grant that,
That's correct. Ms. Benson has indicated that sometimes these other grant agencies won't act until some of the other ones make their decisions.
Right.
They pretty much feel that if we hadn't applied for this loan, that it might hurt our chances to get the grants.
And one of the things that you noted in your report is that if the grant doesn't come, we of course can rescind
Right.
the loan application itself.
Absolutely.
And the deadline is April 14th.
Right.
Then let's be about it.
Yeah.
Be about it.
I know that this has been ongoing now for, what, 2 years, is it?
Yeah, I believe this is the second year we've applied for ARC and CDBG for the Rock Hill Sewer Collection Project.
This happens to be, I believe, in Mr. Perkins' ward, and since he's not here tonight, I'll motion approval.
we have a motion for approval. We have a second.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Passes. Brings us down to executive session
Mayor, I
over
move we
personnel
close-
matters.
Close session.
if that